Welcome to Season 5 of the Manufacturers Network. Real talk with the people building what's next in manufacturing. And now your host, Lisa Ryan.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Excited to introduce our guest today, Russell Halper. Russell works with large organizations trying to move AI from experiments into actual operations, where projects either create real value or quietly fail. His focus on why so many AI and supply chain initiatives breaks down after deployment and what it really takes to make them stick on the shop floor. So, Russell, welcome to the show.
Lisa, excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
So it's an interesting background in that I started off studying in a PhD with a guy who was famous for creating the phrase chaos theory. So I started off my career doing a PhD in mathematics, thinking I'd go into academia, and quickly realized I didn't like to teach, publish, research, or be in a math department. So I had some minor road bumps along the way, but I had moonlighted in the business school, taking a couple classes in a subject called operations research, which for those that aren't familiar with it, is one of the precursors to data science. You can think about it, data science and supply chain.
Okay.
So I worked with UPS then, left, I joined a large consumer goods manufacturer as an internal consultant, did a lot of work, boots on the ground manufacturing, going out to actual plants and doing work with the plants and how they're operating and figuring out how do we take the somewhat academic level and the boots on the ground operations and get those things working together. From there, I joined a little 16-person consulting firm out of Palo Alto. Over 8 years there, made partner, we grew it to about 100. We sold that to a large consulting firm, was there as an MD helping run the West Coast Gen AI practice for a while, and ultimately decided that I thought there's much more interesting and impactful work that we can do as a smaller, leaner organization, and really helping find the things that drive value for our clients rather than being stuck into the route of particular partnerships and accounts that you've run into in some of the larger organizations. So left a couple years ago, started this new organization called Insight Kitchen. And we now help companies at the intersection of manufacturing and supply chain and AI.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's quite a journey. And it is interesting because there's benefits for working for a large company. Obviously, they have more money to be doing more things, but man, the hoops you got to jump through and the red tape, sometimes it's just more fun to go back and be a maverick on your own and start with the smaller. Or I've always enjoyed my times when organizations were small. And then as I continued to be with them and they grew, they just aren't that much fun anymore. So I get it.
Yeah, the nature of the work is really different, and the things you can do for clients are different when you're in services, when you're small versus large. And I like to think now I'm unconstrained to go after something. I don't have the politics around what does the account need? What are our software partnerships? What are some of those things that are constraints?
Yeah.
We've also been able to build our team. And so we know that every single person we bring to the table is going to be great. And it's been fun. It's scary sometimes, but it's a lot of fun to go build something.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about one of my favorite topics today with AI because, as we were talking about before the show, my new book came out on smart plant and being with AI. And when I was looking at all the things we're going to talk about today, I'm like, this is perfect because a lot of manufacturers have experimented and continue to experiment with AI. Why do so many initiatives look successful in pilot mode, but tend to struggle once they hit the actual operations?
So first of all, Lisa, congratulations on the book. That's a huge accomplishment. I'm excited for you. There are a lot of reasons why an AI application might look okay in a pilot, and then when you go to scale it, you have problems. And the first thing I'd say is AI is not just one thing. There's lots of different types of things that are under the umbrella of AI. And so there could be different failure modes for different areas. If you're thinking about computer vision versus agentic work versus physical AI. But When you're in a pilot, it's generally a controlled environment with a specific set of objectives, or at least there should be a specific set of objectives of what you're trying to achieve in that limited time frame. What I don't think a lot of organizations do is think about the pilot as a step to the larger thing when they're doing the work in the pilot. So how are we thinking about setting up the organization from a change management perspective that these initiatives are going to be successful? How do we think about understanding what's all the issues the AI is not doing well in the pilot that we need to make sure we're able to tackle along the way? And even before then, how are you setting up the pilot in a way that's scoped, that's representative of what those longer challenges would be? Oftentimes when we see, I like to call it operational AI, when we're bringing it into an organization's operations, manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, et cetera. But when we're talking about operational AI, there's a lot of really complicated real world constraints that have to be accounted for. A 95% solution oftentimes is catastrophically bad. And so how do we think about setting up a pilot that we're getting enough complexity in there that we're able to understand what complexity we're able to handle and not, and how are we using it in the right way to go and actually solve the problem is also really important. So it's hard to give me one answer, but there's a lot of things that can happen, but there's a lot of planning you can do up front to help reduce the likelihood of that happening.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about operational AI because it seems that everybody's looking at AI as like that magic bullet that it's going to be the easy button. We just push it and AI is going to solve all of our problems. And we don't take into consideration, how does this fit into our current system? How does it work with the equipment that we've had since the 60s and 70s? How does it fit with people who are still afraid of tech versus your digital natives that are out there? So many things. And with the Smart Plant book of remembering the human judgment we're starting to remove because we're just thinking that AI can take care of everything. So what are some of the early warning signs that will tell you that AI or analytics is headed towards abandonment even after deployment?
When we talk about abandonment, obviously usage is one that's worth tracking. You can build the best system in the world, but if nobody uses the results, they're not actually a recommendation, decision, insight from a system. It's not actually making it to how you physically operate the factory floor. You have a big disconnect. But when we talk about why organizations might abandon AI or why it might fail, one of the frameworks I like to think about is how good is the AI relative to the people who are doing that work. So let's say you build an AI model and it's 95% or 99% as good as the people who are doing that work today. What does that 1% difference mean? Now, is that 1% error something that compounds? And so instead of just 1% error, it's 1% error, and you're making decisions much more quickly because it's AI, and that error is now building up and it's getting bigger and bigger, and you're actually driving yourself away from how you would operate. And the value of pulling the work out of the people's hands and putting in the AI is not adding value? Or is that 99% valuable enough because it's covering things that you might not be able to do otherwise? There's lots of organizations where they have more work than they have people. And if I'm getting to the work that I might not get to otherwise, and that work can be incremental decision-making, oversight, alerting around issues, right? Lots of things that you might not otherwise get to, the value proposition changes quite a bit. And so one of the things that I think is important up front is to understand for how you're going to apply AI for a particular problem. What's the risk factor around it? What does it actually really need to do to be successful? And sometimes going after the same thing, there's 2 or 3 different ways to bring it to the table. And some of those might be much more amenable to having favorable outcomes than others.
Well, and it's interesting because you talked a little bit at the beginning about the people. I speak at a lot of industry events with vendors there that have all the bright, shiny objects and the newest technology. And people are like, oh, that's cool. And they just start buying stuff without really thinking about the integration, or even more important, is this something that people are going to understand, that they're going to use? Because otherwise you're paying tens of thousands or millions of dollars for something that's going to be basically the same as the treadmill that becomes a clothes hanger.
I don't know if you see this too. I think I've seen a number of organizations that get over enamored by the ability to have a prompt somewhere in a tool. Almost like the rest of it doesn't matter anymore. I could write a prompt to do something, and so it's got AI, and it moves up the stack of what they, or I should say, moves up in terms of what they're interested in buying.
Yeah. It's just so funny because remember back in the day where people were like, I saw it on the internet, so it must be true. It's like now ChatGPT said it, so it must be true. It's no, Chat just randomly makes stuff up. AI hallucinates. And I think that even though it is one of the best tools on the market, but it's not the be all end all, it's not the easy button. We still need that human judgment. We still need the buy-in from our teams. We still need the culture that makes it all the robots and the humans play nice together.
There's also oftentimes an information asymmetry between what AI can see and what a person knows. And AI might have access to much more data than a person, but a person might have access to things that aren't in the system data.
Yeah.
Somebody called them today and said, this machine's running slow. We need to adjust our plan, or, hey, we're going to be 30 minutes late getting this product through the door. It's a transportation issue. There's a lot of things that a person, or just frankly, like, somebody's running this line, and I know when that person runs it, I have more issues. You can make arguments if you have all the information, you can get to that and get it all in the AI, but pragmatically, most organizations don't have that. And so how do you think about getting the best of both worlds? I think becomes really valuable. You're human in the loop with the AI, where they're working together, versus being able to throw everything at the AI to have it done. I think there's some decisions that make sense and others where it's important to have that oversight.
Exactly. And you think about the fact, well, you were saying that humans will pick up on things that the machines don't, just because they have 40 years of experience and they've experienced the one-offs that have not been programmed. But you think about, you have your 40-year operator that comes up and says, hey, something's up with this machine. And if leadership continues to say, hey, the dashboards are green, everything's groovy, just go back to work, they're going to stop wasting their breath. And we're losing that tribal knowledge. These people have built up their sensory library for decades, just thinking that the machines can do it. So how are we going to, I think that's one of the biggest issues, that we have so many people leaving the workforce and we are looking at AI as the easy button, where no, we need to capture that knowledge of those people that are walking out the door.
It's a super interesting question, and it's something that I think a lot of organizations are struggling with, and not just in manufacturing.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. A lot of the tasks that AI is better at are things that you're typically doing with younger entry-level or less skilled employees. And when you look at the senior parts of your workforce, they've built out a set of knowledge that's been built over many years with trials and error and learnings and scars on their back, and pick all the analogies you want, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a real question of, how do you build for the future in this new world? Now, the other part of that is AI will continue to get better. And so how do you set yourself up as a business so as AI gets better, your business gets better? I'm stealing that quote from somebody, I forget who, but I think it's a really important framework. If AI is getting better,
if you say it 5 or 4 times, then it's yours.
There we go. I don't need credit. I'm just more, I think it's a great framework to think about, though. It's, look, am I getting better or worse as this technology gets better?
And I think about that now too, about just how my business has absolutely changed in the last 3 years since I've been using AI. And I really can't even imagine what it's going to look like 3 years from now, because the change is just so accelerated. And I'm a solo one person, the experience that I've had versus a manufacturing plant, it's when we have to keep in that curiosity mode, that we're continuing to learn and not putting all of our eggs in that basket. There's often a disconnect between the technical teams that are building AI and then the operations teams that are expected to use it. So what do you think from your experience is that missing link?
So one of the things that we have as a premise with our team is cross-functional expertise. The people on our team that are AI engineers and data scientists also have domain expertise in supply chain. And one of the failure modes, and this isn't just the failure mode of AI, we've seen this with almost every generation of technology, is you build these horizontal domain agnostic capabilities like a data warehouse, a foundation model, right? Things that are not built in with specific information about, say, like manufacturing. And now we want to go apply that to a manufacturing area where I need to understand, how do I build something? And you have companies where you can have two companies making directly competing products that sit next to each other on a store shelf. And their manufacturing processes might be totally different. And you're talking about products that are direct competitors. Now imagine the entire world of things that can be manufactured, right? It's a huge world with a tremendous amount of diversity. So we're taking these technologies that don't have domain built into it, and we're trying to apply it into a domain deep area where we need to have specific things that matter. And where I think people get lost is they lose sight of, this is a business problem, right? I want to drive my manufacturing efficiency and attainment, and I reduce my reject rate, right? All the things that I want to think about in a manufacturing environment. And those are the things that are actually driving value for the business, right? The AI's got a great brand. Everybody's talking about AI. It's a wonderful brand. It's a great technology. But I think the technology has been leading a lot of conversations versus starting with what you're really trying to do as a business. And that's where we always start, right? That's what I always think about with our customers. Going back to your why do pilots fail, it's let's start with figuring out what results do we want to drive. And then we figure out how to get there.
Okay. So manufacturers love the phrase clean data first, but you've suggested that mindset can sometimes slow progress. So why do you feel like that?
So I've seen a lot of organizations over the years say they can't go do something because their data's not ready. And we need to go get our data ready to do this. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different organizations. But one of the things that we find is you could spend an infinite amount of time working on getting your data clean and not actually creating any real business value. And it's not that you don't want better data or you don't want to get it cleaned and staged and put in the right place. And nowadays have the right context on top of it or data ontology on top of it so you can effectively leverage it. But I have found for a lot of times, especially if you're working on specific problems, it's almost better, in fact, it's often better to go work on how do you solve that problem and pull the data with you. Because you're going to find things in that data you never would have found otherwise if you just worked on how do you get it perfect first. I know there's also the phrase of garbage in, garbage out, and it's not untrue, but you could also argue you could have two organizations with the same level of quality of data, and one is better at using that data to make decisions than the other. Garbage in, garbage out does matter. We need to make sure the data is good enough. We're getting things that drive value for the business. But I do think there are times when you're able to get good insights from not so good data. And the best way to clean it is just to go do something with it.
Yeah, I think about that. A couple things that done is better than perfect of just getting it out there. But wasn't it, I'm going to attribute this wrong. I think it was Einstein, though, that said that if he had an hour to work on a problem, he would spend the first 55 minutes working on the question first. So I think that going with what you said is just is take the time, take the step backwards to try to figure out what is the problem I'm trying to solve instead of just throwing ideas at it or coming up with a great new prompt.
Yeah, 100%. And so going back to your first question, why do some of these pilots fail? There's just these technology-led initiatives. We have to use it. We have to go put AI in. Let's go throw it at something. And oftentimes we say it's the wrong way. It's the wrong use case. It's applied the wrong way. It's the wrong technology. And then they're surprised at the end it doesn't work. And so that being thoughtful up front and being thoughtful up front from the perspective of what drives value for the business, for the shareholders, for the stakeholder for this particular initiative is really key. And how do we measure it? What are the right KPIs or metrics? How are those being supported? How do we think about baselining versus what it means to be better and all the measurements before we even get into how are we actually applying the AI to get there?
Yeah. And along those lines, when organizations are focusing on AI implementation, where do you think that they most underestimate the human side of that equation?
There's a few different places. I would say organizations tend to underestimate or overestimate the capabilities AI has natively out of the box today.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, let's say you want to build a new tool, right? You want to build some type of scheduling solution for a factory, right? I'm doing my finance scheduling. There's this perspective now, like you could build anything with Claude Code. So let's go gather all the requirements, right? We're going to spend a week in a war room. We're going to put an AI note taker there. We're going to get on the board. We're going to draw everything. We're going to talk about the way the factory works, get everything in one shot. We have all the requirements now documented. I'm going to use AI to now build a prompt. I'm going to take that prompt. I'm going to throw it at Claude Code. I'm going to one-shot it, right? And have it go build me a scheduling solution. I don't know about you, Lisa, but to me, that idea terrifies me if I was a business leader. That's actually going to create value for me as a company. And that's, I think, how people perceive AI oftentimes. It's, I just go plug it in, it's going to be driving value for me. Right?
Yeah.
Or I do a little bit of work and it's going to drive value. And you have to get everybody lined up. You have to get the people in place. We work with organizations that range from mid-market companies to very large Silicon Valley companies that have deep investments in the AI space. And we help them build the AI that runs a lot of their supply chain or parts of their supply chain. And even there, it takes real work. It's not always plug and play. In fact, it's often not plug and play. And it needs to be tuned to the way you run your business. Lisa, but that's been my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's a bright, shiny new tool and we play with it. Not that it's a great example, but you think about the time that we spent, like when I was first using AI or playing with it, what was it, 2 years ago or a year ago, when you got to make your own action figure where you could upload your photos in it. So yes, it was fun. Did I learn some skills? Yeah. But in the scheme of things, I used a lot of resources to make something that really did not help the world one bit, except I got to post it on Facebook and people commented for a couple minutes. But it really is looking at what is the value of this. How is it going to help me make more money, save time, reduce downtime, whatever it is, which is just, it's not the fun stuff. I would rather make myself into an action figure than figure out a marketing plan by putting all my financial data into an AI program and having it do an assessment for me. But we sometimes err on the side of what is more where we think we're going to look good instead of what's actually going to be good for the company.
Yeah, and I have a thesis that says mid-market companies have a huge opportunity right now because their ability to drive AI adoption tends to be a lot faster, actually, than a lot of the large organizations we see. There's generally more focused operations. There's fewer liability issues around security. And so the risk profile around adopting some of these tools from a leadership perspective and legal perspective tends to be a little different. And you can hit a big nail with that hammer because you have fewer operations in your company. It's a really interesting place right now where some organizations can just move way faster than others.
Yeah, absolutely. As we're getting to the end of our time together, for manufacturing leaders right now who are listening, who feel pressure to move faster with AI, what should they be paying attention to that they may not be right now?
So I think it still goes back to the fundamentals of we're going to run a business. We want to drive outcomes for the business. And where is the areas in the organization I can drive better efficiency, create value? That's not a different conversation than it's ever been. In fact, building the business case for a lot of these things, that business case is going to look very similar for a legacy software solution in AI. If I'm doing some type of workflow automation, document processing in the yard, the mechanics of the financial conversation is not that different in terms of what drives value. It's the tool that we can use for it. And so I always recommend start with the actual business challenge you're trying to solve rather than start with, let's go and just figure out how do we use AI.
Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah. And different businesses have different things that are like existential threats, right? Issues that are trends in their industry. Those are great places to start. What's on the executive agenda of things we need to tackle in the next 3 years to be competitive within our market space, right? If we know those, now we got a target list of things that we can think about. And I like to say, if AI is the right thing to use, how to use it, and then how do we actually go build it?
Okay. Russell, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Okay. I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network podcast. If this conversation gave you something to think about, share it with someone else who will get it. And hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next.